Hi, everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Salesforce with Megan. For those that are new here, I talk about topics related to career advancement and also productivity tips to help you throughout your career, but also really just to encourage you to have fun through it as well. So today we have another content creator here with us, David Massey. You might recognize him for his spectacular Admin 101 course on Udemy, plus a new course that he also just released as well, Introduction to Flows. So today, David, I would love to be able to really talk about your course, yourself as a content creator, and most in particular, your journey into Salesforce so others can get to know you as well. So please just go ahead and start off by introducing yourself and tell us a little bit more about how you started in getting into Salesforce.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thanks for having me. I've never been called a content creator before, so that's a first for me. But yeah, in terms of my background and my route into Salesforce, it was actually 2 years ago today. So it was the 31st of March, 2020 that I first found Salesforce. Prior to that, I was a travel agent. I'd worked in sales and service for about 15 years. So I had like a decade and a bit experience in that. And I'd done everything really from building and training and running sales teams to setting up and running service desks as well. So I come from a slightly different background than a lot of IT professionals and a lot of Salesforce professionals, and just in the fact that I don't have an IT degree. I didn't have any experience in the IT world whatsoever, unless you consider really fixing TVs and selling TVs and laptops. So, it was a little bit of a strange kind of roll into there. But in terms of why I found Salesforce and how I did it, it was recently, and until Salesforce, I was actually a travel agent. So I was working in the travel industry, building completely bespoke travel solutions. So that's where people are going around like Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam for 7 to 12 weeks, everything from flights, hotels, transfers, trips. So that was the kind of stuff that I was doing. And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, it just completely wiped out all the travel industry in the UK. Like literally walked in one day and we just lost like 50% of all of our commission, which in the UK, the travel industry is basically minimum wage and you earn all your money in commission. So you kind of just lost everything overnight. And we knew nothing was going to change anytime soon. So it was a case of just kind of keeping going. At that point, and even now, I've got a wife, a mortgage, 2 kids, a big dog. I didn't really have the option to kind of sit and wait for things to get better. So I started just having to have a look around really at what I could do. First thing that I looked at was cybersecurity, but very quickly realized that coding and development and cybersecurity wasn't for me. It just didn't engage me that much. So one day I was on the phone to one of my good friends who's a recruiter out in America. And he was just saying to me, so, well, have you thought about Salesforce? I was like, I'm not an IT guy. And I was like, it's just not the way I am. I'm more dealing with people and speaking to people and understanding what needs to be done. I said, I'm not really that IT focused. He said, well, just take a look at Salesforce, have a look at it, just have a play around with it, watch a couple of videos on it. And, it's worth a shot, isn't it? You don't really know what you're doing. So later that night, I fired up YouTube and I just brought up a video on Salesforce. And I still remember it to this day because it was a video about reporting in Salesforce, which coming from a sales background and a manager background, it used to take me, and used to take a full day to try and get all of the details, all of the records, the spreadsheets, and just work out conversion rates and profits and all that. And I watched this video, and within literally 2.5 minutes, someone had built a report and then could just click refresh and it refreshed with live data. And I was blown away. I was like, it was like witchcraft to make that, considering how much effort I used to put in. So I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. So I fired up Trailhead, started working my way through Trailhead and kind of caught the bug for it from there because, like I said, my background sales and service. So I've worked with a whole lot of CRMs, some good and some absolutely shockingly bad. And, working with Salesforce, seeing what it could do, I could kind of join the dots between my background and my experience and what I used to do day to day and just how much it could really help people. So I started studying. I was still working full time. Used to have an 1.5-hour commute to the office. Then I'd work like an 8-9 hour day. Then I'd have an 1.5 hours back. So, I was out the house like 13 hours a day, basically. So I only had limited time, but I kept studying. And it was 51 days after I very first saw Salesforce that I actually sat and passed my admin cert. So from then, I carried on studying. I kept trying to get a job in Salesforce, which, as everyone knows, is a challenge when you've not got the experience. And then 4 weeks after that, I passed my app builder cert, managed to land a job for a company called Art of Cloud in the UK, which is like a bespoke boutique kind of consultancy. Then I just kept on going, and about 7 or 8 months later, so by I think it was February 2021, I actually had my admin, my app builder, my sales cloud, service cloud, community cloud, field service, and CPQ cert. So I racked up quite a few in quite a short amount of time, really.
That's amazing. That I also come from a sales background, so seeing all the reports just kind of pop into one page, and seeing like the manager's overview of you, and then also how you're doing on a daily basis, but how your team is doing, and just seeing like your close ones and all this information just on one page was so exciting. Like you said, it was just kind of like mind blown. But and my question, like it sounds like you went into sales right away. Were you excited about Sales Cloud?
Yeah, it was. Well, like I said, for me, it was crazy to see, like, even simple things. I used to have Post-it notes everywhere. And I used to use my Outlook to set reminders for, when clients were due to travel, when they was due back, to remind me to send them, a card to welcome them back and to give them a quick phone call and stuff like that. And it was like, I can do all this in a CRM. I can do it all in a system. Mm-hmm. And there was just so many things like that. Like you mentioned reports before, and dashboards are so cool. And I know that makes me sound a bit like a geek, but they are so cool when you can just get something so graphical and easy to see, and you hit refresh and everything changes and it's live information. It blew my mind. It blew me away. Really easily pleased, by the way, as you've probably guessed.
Yeah. Well, no, the refresh button is like one of the funnest buttons ever. It's just like refresh, how much data can change in like 2 seconds. Well, that's really cool. I love hearing just people's backgrounds and like how they got into Salesforce. And it really goes to show others who are watching that you don't have to have, like what you and I talked about offline, you don't have to have a tech degree to get into Salesforce. These are things that you can be a sales representative before. You can work really anywhere and really carry those industry skills into Salesforce, because one way or the other, it does match together. So I want to ask you about your studying, right? Because like you've gone to just finding out about Salesforce, you racked up your certs, CPQ, Field Service Lightning. Those are not easy ones. Those are really niches. Yeah. So like kind of talk to the audience and just kind of share your learning journey. Like, how did you learn? What resources were best for you? What suggestions do you have to other people that are learning too?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, in terms of the struggles, what I kind of struggled with, the number one thing for me was time. Like, honestly, time was so precious because I was out the house 13 hours a day. Then obviously needed, most people need 8, but I only generally get 6 hours sleep, so I'm not a big sleeper. But then I still had family time, so I had my little lad's football team to look after and stuff like that. So time was really limited. And it was one of them of just trying to get net time, like no extra time, where I could just make the most out of it. Mm-hmm. So what I started doing, and this really worked well for me, was I didn't study in big blocks. So there was maybe only a handful of occasions where I'd sit down and I had 2 or 3 hours and I could really sit down and go for it. What I did is I used to carve out just 15 minutes, half hour, stuff like that, and just recap things. And what that's good at doing as well is it's like that old adage, I think it's called Parkinson's Law, where if you give a task a certain amount of time, that task, no matter how easy and quick it is, will expand to take up all of that time. Mm-hmm. So I was just like quick, short bursts, you know what I mean? Right, what are lead assignment rules? I go read through them, make sure I knew them, and then I go, right, put them down. And then next time I was like, right, how does web to lead work? Do you know what I mean? That kind of stuff. And it was just that. So I'd definitely say, just attacking it in small chunks and keeping it very clear and concise. And I guess that kind of ties into a couple of other things as well. And whenever I train people, the biggest thing I always talk about is concepts. Like Salesforce is a huge jigsaw. Just imagine Salesforce as a massive jigsaw. It's made up of so many little bits. Now, if you take just a single piece of that, it doesn't make any sense. And even if you add a couple of pieces to it, you still can't really work out where it fits. So as you're learning and as you're going through the concepts, you are going to feel like you're not really getting anywhere and you don't know what you're doing. But by the time you get to the end of it, suddenly it all starts to fit into place, and you understand why one thing works like that and why another thing ties in like that. And again, when you get to the end, you start to see a lot of similarities. So, you look at lead assignment rules. Well, what are case assignment rules? Exactly the same thing, but for the case object rather than the lead object.
Mm-hmm.
And they're little things you can pick out, the similarities. So they're like my big tips. And for me, it's all about your learning style. Everybody learns in a different way, and everyone has like a preferred modality in terms of learning. Some people are visual, some people are audio, some people are kinesthetic, and they're even talking about, like written as a type of learning as well. So, like reading and lectures and stuff. And I just think it's a case of finding what works for you, really. Find your learning style and then just maximize it as well.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you talked about that, because that's something that I talk about as well too. You're relearning how to learn, basically.
Yeah.
And some of us haven't touched the books like in 10 years. So it really depends, like even those that are coming out of college that decide to really get into Salesforce, like they have to relearn how to learn without a teacher almost, and without a group next to them. And I think like the core things when you come into Salesforce is, yes, definitely find your learning type that you are. I say test out all different types of materials. Don't rush into it. Take your time. Make sure that you are learning. Like you said, if you are more of a visual learner, take some courses, listen to things. There are YouTube videos, your course. And also join groups. I think joining groups and hearing how other people learn and teach you vice versa, I think that's really helpful too, which is fun. So for those that are watching, definitely make sure to find some groups out there. So I would love to be able to ask you, the next question is that what kind of inspired you to create your admin course?
So the reason I created my admin course was when I was going through learning, and Trailhead is absolutely fantastic, and you have all the documentation as well. And you have a lot of other documentation as well. For me, Focus on Force is pretty much the number one thing I recommend to anyone, because Trailhead's good, and you've got the Salesforce help, which goes into a bit more detail. But when it comes to mock exams, there's nothing that even comes close to the Focus on Force mock exams. In my opinion, they are the best ones out there by an absolute mile. And like I said, when I was going through Udemy courses, I just found that they just weren't right for me. Some were a little bit too slow, and they used to like meander around the point, and it'd be like an hour lesson to teach me lead assignment rules, which really aren't that complex. Do you know what I mean? Like you can just nail them quite quickly. And I just used to switch off. I've only got a very short attention span, which is why learning in short bursts works for me. So when I had to watch a video that went on and on and on about something, I lost interest. And then there were other ones which I took, which I could tell that the person teaching it was obviously incredibly good at what they did, but they've been entrenched in it for so long that they perhaps couldn't see it from the perspective of someone who's brand new. Whereas for me, I'm completely brand new to Salesforce. Like I say, only 2 years in, I've achieved quite a lot in that and looked and ran quite a few projects. But more importantly, I've been able to really take just general life-to-life, day-to-day activities and knowledge that you have, and you just put that into context with Salesforce, with the features and the concepts and how it all works. And that was the idea behind my course, was just to create something that was clear, concise, straight to the point, and really designed for people who don't come from an IT background. There's very little, if any, jargon in there, because there's no point us including jargon if we then got to Google every 2 minutes, or what does that mean? What does that acronym mean? What's that example? Do you know what I mean? You just lose your trail of thought. So yeah, I just try to keep it clear and concise and just straight to the point, really.
And that brings me into my next question, but you also mentioned something. You mentioned that Google is kind of like, I think that's going to be all of our best friends.
Yeah.
Like Focus on Force, here's another course, but here's Google still in the middle. So I would love to ask you as well, you just kind of touched on how you like giving the material pretty precise and just kind of directly to the point. If somebody was new to the ecosystem and they were searching for some courses out there, How can they find you online outside of Udemy? Can they connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
And then also, what differences are there for your course? Like, what makes your course stand out, and how would it help a user that is interested in studying Salesforce?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I do have a website, which is davejmassey.com. And I'm always a bit egotistical having one in my own name, but I just couldn't face creating something like Salesforce Aardvark or Salesforce Kangaroo or something like that. So I just use my own name to do it that way. So yeah, so there's that one. But yeah, sorry, in terms of what sets my course apart and what's different is it's different. It's not better or worse than any other courses. And I don't think any courses really are better or worse than each other's. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some courses which are perhaps not brilliant because they haven't been updated for like half a decade or something like that, but there's still value in them. And the idea behind my course is if you've been using Salesforce for 10 years, there's no point taking my course, being completely honest with you, because there's going to be courses which are more technical, which are going to be better for you. But if you're someone who's brand new and looking to break into the ecosystem, then I've been there, I've done it, I've walked a mile in your shoes. You know, I was the guy who went from being a travel agent to being a Salesforce consultant literally in like 2 or 3 months. And because of that, and I'm still very conscious of that experience, and every day I'm reminded of it because I'll notice little things that perhaps other people don't notice, like little tips and tricks, you know, like, oh, you know, if you change your display density, then it actually forces Salesforce to recache and just makes all your changes, rather than when you add a field and then you try and edit it and you're like, oh, where's the field gone? And you've got to wait. You know, there's stuff like that. I'm seeing it from like a fresh pair of eyes, and that's what I try and do. I try and teach and I try and explain everything, just as if we're sat in a coffee shop. We're just having a cup of coffee. We've got our MacBooks open or laptops or, you know, any other Windows software is available. You know, we've got that and we're sat next to each other. And I'm just going, look, this does this, and to set this up, you would do this. It's just about really just helping people. It's not about having this air of I've been doing it for so long, so this is how you do it. The thing with Salesforce and its strength as well as its weakness is there are so many ways to do anything. You know, and you know, there's so many best practices, and that's what's bizarre is best practices vary from company to company. So is there really a best practice? Don't know. Still figuring that out myself. But yeah, just enjoy the journey, really. That's the big thing.
Thank you. I like that answer. And I think it's really important because, kind of going back to what we were saying earlier, you learn from others too in the journey. You don't just learn from yourself.
Yeah.
So it's nice to be able to have your content out there and give people a new perspective into learning Salesforce. Hear it from somebody else that, you know, went through your shoes not too long ago. So it's still fresh up here.
Yeah.
So, perfect. The last question I have for you is, are there any final words that you would like to say to the audience, perhaps that you kind of talked a little bit on it, but are coming into the Salesforce ecosystem, that are learning, that are trying to identify their learning style, really just anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I guess the big thing for me when I was learning was I had a lot of self-doubt, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people have that, because like I say, I am not very technical, and you know, my wife and my son will tell you that I am not very technical at all. But that's the beauty of Salesforce. You don't have to be a web developer. You don't have to be a programmer. You don't even have to know what Python is or anything like that. You know, Salesforce, there are so many roles within that. I can guarantee you, I could speak to anyone and they'll have skills that will apply for it. So, you know, you could be looking at someone who's a business analyst. Now, if they can speak to customers and they can get information out of them, and, you know, they can really assess, you know, what's going on in the company and the business processes, that's just as valuable as someone who can sit for 8 hours straight and write a load of complex code. It just varies depending on your role. So, you know, whatever your background is, you can do it. You've just got to keep going. And again, that's a big thing as well, is as you're getting into it, you are going to get knocked back a lot. I think I sent literally over 100 direct messages on LinkedIn before I even got anyone to respond to me. So you are going to hit it, but you've just got to keep going. You're going to get a lot of no's before you get a yes, but it's worth it, because, you know, I'm sat here now in a position where for the first time in my entire life, because again, I've been in sales my entire life, for the first time in my entire life, I know exactly what money's coming in every single month because I'm salaried now, as opposed to being performance based. I don't work weekends. I don't really work evenings. I get to spend more time with my family and my kids, and I just get to actually enjoy it. And like one of the guys I work with, I get to build really cool stuff, every day. That's it's a really good job. It is a career as well, and it isn't a job. It's not a quick fix, but once you get into it, once you're at the top of the mountain, if you've climbed to actually get in that job and that role, it's so rewarding. So, you are going to have times where you think, oh, I can't do this, or I can't be bothered. You're going to throw stuff across the room because something doesn't kind of click. Like if anyone's done the super badges, and the security super badge in particular is well renowned for this, there are going to be times where you're going to struggle. And when you're trying to get a job, you are going to be knocked back a lot of times, but just keep going because you'll get there. Just have faith in yourself. Just keep plugging away and you'll be amazed. It's all about little and often. Do you know what I mean? Every little bit of progress you make is progress in the right direction. And you'll get to the point at the end where you think, well, I've only spent like 10 or 15 minutes over the last couple of days, but you will have learned so much in those 10 or 15 minutes. So just take advantage of that and just keep plugging away.
Yeah, exactly. For those that are watching, remember that if you're new to Salesforce, you're transitioning into something that you've never done before. But always, like David said, remember that your skills, regardless of where you come from, whether you're a recent graduate or 20 years working in a different field, you can pivot those skills into Salesforce and they'll work for you. Just stick with it. Stick with it.
Definitely. Keep going.
Exactly. Well, terrific, David. Thank you so much for really taking the time to speak with us today as the Salesforce industry keeps growing and more people keep entering the ecosystem. Having a solid study resource, just like you have through your Udemy course, is so important. Really, thank you for helping the ecosystem out. So if you have questions for David, you can reach out to him directly on LinkedIn. His link will be below. If you have any direct questions, you can also put it in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video if you do enjoy content like this. We'll continue making it. And also don't forget to follow us both on LinkedIn. And again, David, thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me.
Yay. Bye, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.